Settle in, get comfortable, and let us journey through centuries of maritime heritage, ancient freedoms, and the enduring spirit of a people who shaped the coastlines of northern Europe. In the misty beginnings of recorded time, along the coastal regions where the North Sea meets the land, a distinct group of Germanic peoples emerged. These were the Frisians, inhabitants of a challenging yet bountiful territory stretching across what we now recognize as the northern Netherlands, northwestern Germany, and southern Denmark. Their story begins not with grand kingdoms or mighty emperors, but with communities learning to survive and thrive in one of Europe's most demanding environments. The earliest mentions of these coastal dwellers appear in Roman texts from the 1st century. Pliny the Elder, that great chronicler of the natural world, described peoples living on artificial mounds along the northern shores. These weren't merely settlements. They represented human ingenuity in its purest form. Imagine communities building their homes upon hills they themselves constructed, lifting their families above the threatening tides that could sweep in without warning. The landscape itself shaped every aspect of early Frisian existence. Vast wetlands stretched endlessly, interrupted by ribbons of water that connected interior regions to the open sea. During certain seasons, the land and water became nearly indistinguishable, creating a world where boats proved as essential as carts. The tides governed daily rhythms, and understanding these patterns meant the difference between prosperity and disaster. When Roman legions pushed northward during the reign of Augustus, they encountered Frisian communities already well established in their coastal territories. The Roman perspective, documented by Tacitus in his Germania, provides our earliest detailed glimpse of Frisian society. These were not the barbarians Romans often imagined dwelling beyond civilization's boundaries. Instead, Tacitus described a people with their own laws, customs, and social structures. The relationship between Rome and the Frisians oscillated between cooperation and conflict. Initially, Frisian leaders recognized potential benefits in Roman alliance. Trade goods flowed, and Roman military protection offered security against rival tribes. Frisian warriors even served in Roman auxiliary units, carrying their martial traditions to distant frontiers. These soldiers patrolled Hadrian's Wall in distant Britannia, far from their marshy homelands, serving the empire while maintaining their distinct identity. However, Roman demands eventually proved excessive. Taxation, particularly requirements for cattle and hides, strained Frisian resources. When Roman officials overstepped, demanding tributes beyond agreed terms, rebellion erupted. In 28 CE, Frisian forces ambushed and destroyed a Roman garrison. This wasn't simple raiding. It demonstrated organized military capability and political unity. Rome responded with characteristic force, yet the challenging terrain proved as formidable as Frisian resistance. Subsequent Roman campaigns achieved mixed results. The wetlands that protected Frisian communities frustrated Roman military doctrine designed for open-field battles. Supply lines stretched impossibly long through hostile territory. Eventually, Rome recognized these northern marshes as boundaries not worth the cost of conquest. The Frisians maintained independence while neighboring peoples fell under imperial control. As Roman power waned across Western Europe during the 4th and 5th centuries, massive population movements reshaped the entire region. Germanic peoples migrated, conquered, and established new kingdoms upon Rome's fragmenting territories. The Frisians participated in these transformations, though their role differed from inland tribes. Archaeological evidence suggests Frisian communities expanded during this period, moving into previously uninhabited coastal areas. Some Frisian groups crossed the North Sea to Britain, joining the Anglo-Saxon migrations that would fundamentally alter that island's character. Linguistic connections between Old Frisian and Old English reflect these ancient ties. Even today, certain Frisian dialects share remarkable similarities with English, preserving echoes of common origins. Back in their continental homelands, Frisians developed increasingly sophisticated methods for managing their environment. The terp, or dwelling mound, evolved from simple refuge to complex settlement. These artificial hills grew generation by generation, with each layer representing accumulated material, refuse, soil, clay, built up over decades. Some turpin reached impressive heights, supporting entire villages elevated safely above the highest floods. Agricultural practices adapted to unique conditions. Frisian farmers developed techniques for managing salt meadows, utilizing tidal patterns to naturally fertilize grazing lands. Cattle became central to economic and social life, providing meat, dairy, leather, and wealth on the hoof. These weren't the cattle of inland pastures. These were animals bred for generations to thrive in damp, salty conditions. The 7th and 8th centuries witnessed the emergence of what historians term the Frisian kingdom, though this designation requires nuance. This wasn't a centralized monarchy in the medieval European sense, but rather a confederation of territories united by common culture, language, and increasingly, trade interests. Frisian power during this period shouldn't be underestimated. At its height, Frisian influence stretched from the Sinkfall, modern-day Scheldt estuary, in the west to the Weser River in the east. Redbad, a name that echoes through Frisian historical memory, ruled during this kingdom's peak. His reign, approximately from 680 to 719 CE, represented Frisian independence at its zenith. Redbad wasn't merely a local chieftain. He commanded respect across northern Europe, negotiating with Frankish kings as an equal and resisting Christianization efforts that threatened traditional ways of life. The famous story of Redbad's near baptism captures his character in Frisian memory. According to legend, Redbad stood at the baptismal font, ready for conversion, when he asked the missionary whether his pagan ancestors dwelt in Christian heaven or hell. Told they were in hell, Redbad supposedly withdrew, declaring he preferred hell with his forebears over heaven without them. Whether historically accurate or not, this tale reflects Frisian cultural memory of independence and ancestral loyalty. Frisian territories during Redbad's era functioned as vital commercial hubs. The trading settlement of Dorestad, located at the Rhine's junction with the Lech River, became arguably northwestern Europe's most important commercial center during the 8th century. Archaeological excavations reveal a sophisticated urban environment, workshops producing goods for export, warehouses storing merchandise from across the known world, and harbors accommodating vessels from Scandinavia, Britain, and the Frankish kingdoms. The Frisian relationship with water transcended mere survival. It became the foundation of remarkable prosperity. Frisian sailors and merchants dominated North Sea trade routes throughout the early medieval period. Their vessels, designed for both coastal waters and river navigation, carried goods across vast networks connecting Baltic amber merchants with Frankish silver traders, British wool producers with Rhenish wine exporters. Frisian trade wasn't limited to tangible goods. Knowledge, techniques, and cultural practices flowed along these maritime highways. Frisian merchants established trading posts in numerous coastal cities, creating diaspora communities that maintained connections with their homelands while integrating into local economies. In England, Frisian traders operated so extensively that certain areas became known as Frisian quarters. The famous Frisian cloth, woven from wool and distinguished by quality and durability, became a sought-after commodity throughout Northern Europe. This wasn't mass production. Frisian textile work represented skilled craftsmanship passed through generations. Each piece demonstrated mastery of techniques for preparing wool, dyeing fabrics with natural colors that wouldn't fade, and weaving patterns that indicated origin and quality. Salt production constituted another crucial industry. The Frisian coast's unique conditions allowed development of specialized salt-making techniques. This preserved protein, essential for maritime journeys and winter survival, commanded high prices in inland markets. Frisian salt works operated seasonally, coordinating with tides and weather patterns to extract maximum yield from coastal salt marshes. Despite Redbad's resistance, Frankish power grew inexorably throughout the 8th century. The Merovingian dynasty gave way to the Carolingians, whose ambitions extended beyond mere territorial expansion to religious and cultural transformation of their domains. Charles Martel, Pepin the Short, and eventually Charlemagne viewed Frisian territories not just as lands to conquer, but as peoples to incorporate into an expanding Christian empire. Military campaigns intensified after Redbad's death. Frankish forces pushed northward systematically, establishing fortifications and securing river crossings. Frisian resistance continued sporadically, but without Redbad's unifying leadership, coordinated opposition proved difficult. Different Frisian regions negotiated separately with Frankish authorities, fragmenting previously united territories. Christianization accompanied conquest. Missionary activity, which Redbad had successfully resisted, accelerated under Frankish protection. Willibrord, later venerated as apostle to the Frisians, established churches and monasteries throughout newly conquered territories. His mission center at Utrecht became a focal point for religious conversion and Frankish administrative control. The martyrdom of Boniface in 754 near Ducum dramatically illustrated ongoing tensions between Christianity and traditional Frisian religion. Boniface, that tireless English missionary, sought converts in the northern Frisian territories when local groups attacked his party. Whether this represented religious resistance, political opposition to Frankish expansion, or simple banditry remains debated. Regardless, Boniface's death became a rallying point for continued Christianization efforts. By the early 9th century, Frisian territories had been formally incorporated into the Carolingian Empire. Charlemagne's administrative reforms imposed Frankish legal structures while maintaining certain Frisian customary laws. This created a hybrid system that would characterize Frisian governance for centuries: formal subordination to external powers combined with substantial internal autonomy. The late 8th century brought new threats across the North Sea. Scandinavian raiders, whom history remembers as Vikings, began attacking coastal settlements throughout northern Europe. Frisian territories, with their wealth accumulated through trade and their exposed coastal positions, became prime targets. The sack of Dorestad in 834 marked the beginning of repeated Viking assaults on this crucial trading center. Chronicles describe attackers arriving in swift longships, overwhelming defenses, seizing goods, capturing people for slavery, and departing before organized resistance could materialize. The psychological impact matched physical destruction. These raids shattered the security that had enabled commercial prosperity. Dorestad suffered multiple attacks throughout the 9th century. Each raid weakened the settlement further until, combined with changing river courses that compromised harbor access, this once mighty trading center gradually declined into insignificance. Archaeological layers reveal destruction levels corresponding to recorded attacks, with burned buildings and hastily buried treasures telling silent stories of panic and loss. Frisian responses to Viking threats evolved over time. Initial reactions focused on defense, strengthening fortifications, organizing watch systems, maintaining armed vessels for patrol and pursuit. However, the fluid political situation of the fragmenting Carolingian Empire complicated defensive efforts. Local rulers competed for power and resources, rather than coordinating against external threats. Some Frisian communities adapted by accommodation rather than resistance. Trade relationships developed between Frisians and Scandinavian merchants, blurring lines between commerce and raid. Certain Viking leaders received grants of Frisian territories from Frankish emperors, desperate to secure borders, creating Scandinavian-ruled enclaves within traditionally Frisian regions. These arrangements proved unpredictable. Viking rulers might defend their granted territories against fellow Scandinavians, or might use them as bases for attacking neighboring Frankish lands. As Europe transitioned into the High Middle Ages, the Frisian territories found themselves increasingly surrounded by feudal principalities. The Holy Roman Empire claimed overlordship to the east, while powerful counts and dukes governed neighboring regions according to feudal hierarchies. Yet Frisian lands developed differently. maintaining traditions of free peasant ownership that distinguished them from surrounding feudal territories. The concept of Frisian freedom emerged during this period, not complete independence from external authority, but rather maintenance of local governance, customary law, and freedom from serfdom. While peasants across much of Europe fell into hereditary bondage to lords, Frisian farmers maintained ownership of their lands. This freedom wasn't given, it was defended, negotiated, and purchased through contributions to common defense and agreed-upon tributes to distant overlords. Frisian customary law, codified in various regional law codes throughout the medieval period, reflected this unique social structure. The most famous, the Lex Frisianum, combined Roman legal concepts with Germanic customary practices and Christian influences. These laws regulated everything from inheritance and marriage to cattle theft and homicide compensation. Significantly, they recognized rights of free men to participate in legal proceedings and community decisions. The landscape continued evolving through human effort. The 11th and 12th centuries witnessed the beginning of large-scale dike construction. These weren't simple embankments. They represented massive communal efforts requiring cooperation across multiple communities. Dike building and maintenance created new forms of social organization. Water boards, associations responsible for managing dikes and water levels, became crucial governing institutions. These boards operated democratically, with members electing leaders and making collective decisions about infrastructure projects and taxation. Dike construction enabled reclamation of land from sea and marsh. Previously uninhabitable areas became productive agricultural zones. This expansion fueled population growth and increased prosperity. New settlements appeared throughout Frisian territories, often marked by characteristic linear village patterns following newly constructed dikes. Despite the violent circumstances of initial Christianization, Christianity became deeply rooted in Frisian society throughout the medieval period. Monasteries and churches dotted the landscape, serving not just religious functions but also operating as centers of learning, agricultural innovation, and social services. Monastic communities played crucial roles in land reclamation. Cistercian monks particularly excelled at transforming marginal lands into productive farms. Their discipline and organizational skills complemented Frisian hydraulic expertise. Monasteries accumulated substantial landholdings, becoming major economic powers while providing employment and markets for surrounding communities. Parish churches anchored village life. These structures, often built upon ancient terpen, served multiple purposes beyond worship. Church buildings provided secure storage for valuables and documents, hosted community meetings, and offered refuge during emergencies. Bell towers functioned as observation posts, with bells warning of floods, fires, or approaching enemies. Religious festivals structured the calendar, marking seasons and agricultural cycles. Saints' days celebrated with local traditions blended Christian theology with older customs. Pilgrimages connected Frisian communities to broader European religious culture, with Frisian pilgrims traveling to Santiago de Compostela, Rome, and Jerusalem. However, Frisian Christianity maintained distinctive characteristics. The region's history of independence from ecclesiastical authority during the Reformation period demonstrated continued skepticism toward external religious control. This attitude had deep roots in medieval resistance to excessive church taxation and interference in local affairs. The rise of the Hanseatic League during the late medieval period offered new opportunities for Frisian trade. While major Frisian ports never achieved full Hanseatic membership comparable to Lübeck or Hamburg, Frisian merchants participated extensively in Hanseatic trade networks. Frisian ships carried goods throughout the Baltic and North Sea regions. Fish from Norwegian waters, grain from Polish territories, beer from German brewing centers, cloth from Flemish looms. All these commodities flowed through Frisian vessels. Frisian sailors developed reputations for skill and reliability, finding employment on vessels throughout northern Europe. Coastal towns grew prosperous from trade. Stavoren, Dokkum, Leeuwarden, and others developed urban infrastructures, marketplaces, guild halls, defensive walls, and impressive churches that demonstrated civic pride and commercial success. Town charters granted by various overlords recognized urban autonomy, allowing towns to govern internal affairs, establish markets, and maintain fortifications. Guild organizations regulated craft production and commercial practices. These weren't merely economic institutions. Guilds provided social support, regulated quality standards, maintained training systems for apprentices, and defended members' interests. Guild halls became centers of urban social life, hosting celebrations, meetings, and ceremonies. However, competition with other regional powers created ongoing tensions. The powerful Dukes of Burgundy, consolidating control over Low Country territories during the 15th century, viewed independent-minded Frisian regions as obstacles to their ambitions. Military conflicts erupted periodically, with Frisian forces defending their autonomy against Burgundian expansion. The death of Charles the Bold in 1477 triggered a succession crisis that profoundly affected Frisian territories. The Burgundian inheritance passed to the Habsburg dynasty through marriage, bringing Frisian lands into a vast dynastic empire stretching from Spain to Austria. However, Habsburgs faced immediate challenges in actually controlling their northern possessions. Frisian resistance to external control manifested in various forms. Some regions accepted Habsburg overlordship while maintaining traditional freedoms through negotiated agreements. Others engaged in armed resistance, preferring military confrontation to submission. Internal divisions among Frisian territories prevented unified opposition, allowing Habsburg forces to campaign successfully against isolated resistance. The so-called Frisian Wars of the late 15th and early 16th centuries witnessed brutal fighting. The Duke of Saxony, acting as Habsburg military commander, led campaigns subduing Frisian territories one by one. The conquest proved costly in lives and resources, with both sides committing atrocities that long echoed in local memory. By 1523, formal Habsburg control extended across Frisian territories. The incorporation into the Habsburg Netherlands brought changes: centralized administration, standardized taxation, official recognition of territorial boundaries that still influence modern provincial borders. Yet even under Habsburg rule, Frisian regions maintained considerable autonomy. Local governance structures continued, courts applied Frisian customary law, and communities managed their own water control systems. The 16th century brought religious upheaval across Europe. Protestant ideas spread rapidly through the Low Countries, finding receptive audiences among populations resentful of Spanish Habsburg rule. Frisian territories, with their traditions of independence and skepticism toward external authority, proved fertile ground for Reformation theology. Anabaptist movements attracted significant followings in Frisian regions during the 1530s. These radical reformers rejected infant baptism, refused military service, and advocated separation from worldly authorities. Their nonviolent principles resonated with some Frisian communities, though violent incidents, particularly the Münster Rebellion's spillover effects, prompted harsh governmental repression. Menno Simons, the former Catholic priest whose teachings founded the Mennonite tradition, found refuge in Frisian territories. His emphasis on peaceful resistance, community discipline, and separation from state churches appealed to populations seeking religious authenticity while avoiding confrontation with authorities. Mennonite communities established throughout Frisian regions would profoundly influence local culture for centuries. The broader Dutch revolt against Spanish rule, beginning in 1568, divided Frisian territories. Some regions quickly joined the rebellion, viewing it as opportunity to resist Habsburg centralization and defend Protestant faith. Others remained loyal to Spain initially, either from Catholic conviction or pragmatic assessment of military realities. The emergence of the Dutch Republic transformed political structures across Frisian territories. The province of Friesland became one of the 7 united provinces, contributing to common defense and foreign policy while maintaining internal sovereignty. Provincial assemblies controlled taxation and local administration, continuing traditions of representative governance. The 17th century witnessed unprecedented prosperity across the Dutch Republic, and Frisian provinces participated in this golden age. While Amsterdam dominated international commerce and finance, Frisian regions maintained important economic niches. Agricultural innovation characterized Frisian rural economy during this period. Improved drainage techniques expanded productive farmland. Selective breeding developed distinctive Frisian cattle strains renowned for milk production. Dairy products, particularly butter and cheese, found markets throughout Europe. Wealthy merchant families invested in agricultural improvements, applying commercial capital to land reclamation and farm modernization. Maritime activities continued providing livelihoods. Frisian sailors served on Dutch East and West India Company vessels, participating in global trade networks spanning Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Whaling expeditions to Arctic waters employed Frisian seamen, with ports fitting out vessels for dangerous but potentially lucrative hunts. Some Frisian families accumulated considerable wealth from maritime ventures, building impressive canal houses and commissioning artworks. Cultural production flourished alongside economic prosperity. Artists, poets, and scholars emerged from Frisian communities, contributing to the Dutch Golden Age's remarkable cultural achievements. Universities and Latin schools educated elite youth, while printing presses spread literacy and learning throughout the population. However, not all shared equally in prosperity. Social stratification increased as merchant and landowner families accumulated wealth, while laborers and small farmers struggled with taxes and competition. Religious minorities, particularly Mennonites, faced ongoing discrimination despite official toleration. Women, despite crucial economic roles in household production and commerce, remained legally subordinate. The Dutch Republic's global commercial dominance proved temporary. The 18th century brought relative economic decline, as British and French rivals seized commercial and colonial advantages. Frisian provinces, dependent on maritime commerce and agricultural exports, felt these shifts acutely. International conflicts disrupted trade. Wars of Spanish, Austrian, and Polish succession involved the Republic in costly military campaigns. British naval power increasingly controlled sea lanes, limiting Dutch commercial freedom. French armies repeatedly invaded low-country territories, disrupting agriculture and draining resources. Internal problems compounded external challenges. Political disputes between Orangist and States Party factions paralyzed governance. Infrastructure deteriorated as tax revenues declined. Dikes required constant maintenance, yet funding proved insufficient. Several catastrophic floods demonstrated consequences of neglected water management. The Fourth Anglo-Dutch War, 1780-1784, devastated the Dutch economy. British naval superiority swept Dutch commerce from the seas. Frisian ports emptied as trade evaporated. The treaty ending the war reflected Dutch weakness, commercial concessions, territorial losses, and diplomatic isolation. Yet cultural life maintained vitality, despite economic difficulties. The Frisian language, which had survived centuries of official Dutch dominance, experienced literary revival. Poets and writers published works in Frisian, arguing for recognition of their language's worth and distinctiveness. This linguistic nationalism foreshadowed 19th century Romantic movements emphasizing regional identity. The French Revolution's radical ideology spread rapidly across Europe's borders. In 1795, French revolutionary armies invaded the Dutch Republic, establishing the Batavian Republic as a satellite state. This transformation brought dramatic changes to Frisian provinces. Traditional political structures dissolved. Provincial assemblies lost power to centralized national government. Feudal remnants, already minimal in Frisian regions, were formally abolished. Legal codes modeled on French principles replaced customary laws. The Napoleonic Civil Code introduced standardized regulations for property, contracts, and family relationships. In 1810, Napoleon annexed the entire Kingdom of Holland directly into the French Empire. Frisian territories became departments of France, governed by French prefects implementing imperial policies. The continental system, Napoleon's economic blockade against Britain, severely damaged Frisian trade. Smuggling became widespread as communities sought to maintain commercial connections. Military conscription proved deeply unpopular. Young Frisian men found themselves drafted into Napoleon's armies, sent to fight in Spain, Germany, and ultimately the disastrous Russian campaign. Casualty rates were horrific, and few conscripts returned home. Economic hardship intensified. Agricultural prices collapsed due to blocked exports. Urban industries declined without access to overseas markets or raw materials. Tax burdens increased to fund imperial military campaigns. By 1813, when Napoleon's empire collapsed, Frisian provinces eagerly welcomed liberation despite unclear futures. The 1815 Congress of Vienna created the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, uniting former Dutch Republic territories with Belgian provinces under the House of Orange. For Frisian regions, this meant incorporation into a constitutional monarchy, balancing traditional provincial autonomy with national governance. The 1848 constitutional revision established parliamentary democracy, though with limited suffrage. Frisian representatives participated in national politics while defending provincial interests. Political divisions reflected national patterns, liberals advocating modernization and secular government, conservatives defending traditional social structures and religious values. Economic transformation accelerated during the 19th century. Agricultural modernization continued with improved crop rotations, mechanization, and cooperative organizations. Artificial fertilizers increased productivity. Railway construction connected Frisian regions to national and international markets, facilitating commerce while undermining traditional local economic patterns. Industrialization developed more slowly in Frisian provinces than in Holland or Brabant. The region lacked coal deposits and had limited capital for factory investment. However, specific industries emerged: dairy processing cooperatives, shipbuilding yards, and textile mills processing agricultural products. These industries transformed rural economies and social structures. Urban growth accompanied industrial development. Traditional market towns expanded into industrial centers. Working-class neighborhoods appeared, housing factory laborers in conditions ranging from modest to squalid. Social problems, poor sanitation, inadequate housing, child labor, prompted reform movements and political mobilization. The late 19th century witnessed powerful Frisian cultural renaissance. Intellectuals, writers, and activists championed Frisian language and identity, arguing against cultural assimilation into Dutch national culture. This movement drew inspiration from broader European Romantic nationalism, emphasizing regional distinctiveness. The publication of Frisian literature expanded dramatically. Poets like Walling Dijkstra and later Simke Kloosterman wrote powerful works in Frisian, demonstrating the language's literary potential. Historical research recovered and celebrated Frisian past, constructing narratives emphasizing ancient freedoms and cultural distinctiveness. Language became the central cultural battleground. Activists demanded Frisian language education in schools, official recognition for Frisian in government proceedings, and media in Frisian language. These demands met resistance from those viewing language diversity as obstacle to national unity and modernization. The Frisian movement organized politically, establishing associations advocating cultural rights. Newspapers in Frisian provided communication networks for activists. Annual festivals celebrated Frisian identity through music, poetry, and traditional competitions. These activities constructed and reinforced collective identity, linking contemporary Frisians to historical communities. Academic institutions gradually recognized Frisian studies, University departments researched Frisian language, literature, and history. Scholarly work provided legitimacy for cultural claims while training new generations of activists and intellectuals. This institutionalization secured long-term survival of Frisian language and culture. The First World War dramatically affected Dutch society, despite the Netherlands' official neutrality. Economic disruption, refugee flows, and military mobilization created widespread hardship. Frisian provinces, agricultural and relatively prosperous, provided food for the nation while experiencing their own shortages and restrictions. The interwar period brought economic volatility. Agricultural prices fluctuated dramatically, creating prosperity for some and ruin for others. The Great Depression devastated farming communities, with foreclosures and emigration emptying rural areas. Political extremism gained followers, though Frisian regions remained relatively moderate compared to southern provinces. May 1940 brought catastrophe. German forces invaded, overwhelming Dutch defenses in days. Nazi occupation followed, imposing totalitarian control. Frisian provinces experienced the full horror of occupation. Jewish deportations, forced labor, systematic looting, and brutal repression of resistance. Jewish communities, present in Frisian towns for centuries, faced annihilation. Deportations emptied synagogues. Some non-Jewish Frisians heroically sheltered Jews and other persecuted individuals, risking death to maintain human decency. Most remained passive, neither actively collaborating nor resisting. The Holocaust's completion left Frisian Jewish communities destroyed, vibrant cultures erased. Resistance movements operated throughout occupation. Underground newspapers circulated despite Gestapo efforts. Networks helped Allied airmen escape. Acts of sabotage disrupted German operations. The majority of resistance fighters remained unknown, ordinary people performing extraordinary acts of courage. Liberation came in April-May 1945 as Canadian forces advanced through northern Netherlands. Fighting damaged multiple towns before German surrender. The war's immediate aftermath brought relief mixed with grief, celebration for liberation shadowed by mourning for the dead and missing. Post-war decades transformed Frisian society fundamentally. Reconstruction efforts rebuilt damaged infrastructure while modernizing agriculture and industry. The welfare state expanded, providing healthcare, education, and social services. Economic growth, part of broader European prosperity, raised living standards dramatically. Agricultural mechanization accelerated. Tractors replaced horses. Electrical milking machines transformed dairy operations. Cooperative organizations consolidated, creating large-scale processing facilities. These changes increased productivity while reducing agricultural employment. Rural populations declined as young people migrated to cities seeking industrial jobs. Tourism emerged as significant industry. Frisian lakes and coastal areas attracted vacationers from urbanized Western Netherlands and Germany. Holiday cottages and recreational facilities appeared throughout the region. Traditional sailing competitions gained international recognition, showcasing Frisian maritime heritage while generating tourist revenue. Education expanded at all levels. Universal secondary education became standard. University attendance increased dramatically. These developments created upward mobility while transforming cultural life. Television and other mass media integrated Frisian provinces into national and international cultural flows. Environmental concerns emerged during the 1960s-70s. Pollution from agriculture and industry threatened water quality. Development pressures endangered traditional landscapes and ecological zones. Environmental movements mobilized to protect Frisian natural heritage, achieving significant conservation victories. Modern Friesland exists as prosperous province within the Netherlands, maintaining distinctive identity while participating fully in Dutch national life and European integration. The Frisian language enjoys official recognition, used in education, government, and media. Bilingual signs throughout the province assert cultural distinctiveness. Approximately 450,000 people speak Frisian as first language. Educational initiatives ensure language transmission to younger generations. Frisian language media, television channels, radio stations, newspapers, websites provide modern communication in traditional tongue. Literary production continues with contemporary writers addressing modern themes in Frisian. However, challenges persist. Dutch dominance in education and commerce pressures Frisian speakers toward language shift. Young people often prefer Dutch for perceived economic and social advantages. Maintaining language vitality requires constant effort against assimilationist pressures. Economic life balances tradition and modernity. Dairy farming remains important, though organized in large cooperatives very different from historical family farms. Service industries, technology sectors, and tourism provide diverse employment. The province maintains lower unemployment than national averages, suggesting successful economic adaptation. Cultural institutions celebrate and preserve Frisian heritage. Museums present regional history. Festivals attract thousands celebrating traditional music, sports, and customs. Academic research continues exploring all aspects of Frisian culture, from linguistic documentation to archaeological investigation. As you drift toward sleep, consider the Frisian story's remarkable continuity. From Roman-era terp builders to modern dairy farmers, from medieval merchant sailors to contemporary cultural activists, Frisians have maintained distinctive identity across 2 millennia of dramatic change. Their success stemmed from adaptability combined with cultural persistence. Frisians embraced technological innovation and economic opportunity, while defending core aspects of identity, language, customary law, and traditions of local autonomy. This balance between change and continuity offers lessons for communities worldwide facing globalization pressures. The physical landscape Frisians created through countless generations of labor stands as monument to human ingenuity and determination. Every dike, every reclaimed polder, every carefully maintained waterway represents accumulated knowledge and communal effort. This landscape isn't merely backdrop for human activity. It's artifact reflecting cultural values and historical experience. Frisian contributions to broader European civilization deserve recognition. Maritime expertise that dominated medieval North Sea trade. Legal traditions influencing development of representative government. Agricultural innovations feeding growing populations. Linguistic heritage preserving ancient Germanic language forms. These achievements enriched not just Frisian communities but European culture generally. The waves still wash against the same shores where Pliny's Frisians built their turpin. The tides still mark daily rhythms as they did when Redbad resisted Christianization. The landscape has changed. Dikes replace marshes. Highways connect once isolated villages, yet essential characteristics endure. Modern Frisians navigate globalization's challenges, much as ancestors navigated North Sea storms, with skill, determination, and faith in community bonds. The language persists, despite centuries of pressure. Cultural identity remains vibrant, despite homogenizing forces. This resilience across generations and centuries testifies to powerful human capacity for cultural continuity. As sleep approaches, perhaps you'll dream of longships cutting through gray waters, of medieval merchants negotiating in bustling ports, of farmers building dikes stone by stone, of writers crafting poetry in ancient tongue. These dreams connect you to centuries of human experience, to communities who shaped their destinies despite powerful forces arraying against them. The Frisian story continues. New challenges emerge. Climate change threatens carefully engineered. Water management systems, demographic shifts alter community composition. Economic transformations require adaptation. Yet if history provides guidance, Frisian communities will meet these challenges as ancestors did, through ingenuity, cooperation, and steadfast commitment to identity. Rest now, knowing that across the North Sea shores, communities maintain traditions stretching back to time's edge. The Frisian language carries forward sounds spoken before Rome's eagles marched north. The land itself remembers countless generations who shaped it through labor and love. These connections persist, linking past to present to future in endless chain of human community. Sleep well, carried on currents of history like ships sailing ancient trade routes. Let the rhythm of waves lull you into dreams of coastal peoples who built civilizations from marsh and tide. The Frisian story cradles you now, offering comfort. Through its demonstration that culture endures, community persists, and human identity maintains itself across all challenges time presents. May these stories of maritime peoples, of freedom defended and culture preserved, of landscapes transformed and traditions maintained, ease your passage into restful sleep. The Frisians bid you good night across centuries, their history a lullaby, sung by North Sea winds and whispered by tides that have shaped their world since time immemorial. Sleep peacefully,